Okay, I was having a discussion with someone, a gentleman called Ash. He's a great one for conspiracy theories. And he was telling me that it was patently obvious that the 9/11 tragedy was an inside job. And he cited the following reasons. The way the building came down was obviously a controlled explosion, an implosion, came straight down at free fall speed. The building had been designed not to collapse in a fire. It was the first time a steel structure building had ever been brought down by a fire. The building was also designed to take the impact of a jetliner laden with fuel. And I watched various documentaries on Netflix, Amazon Prime that supported this theory. There are no documentaries that don't support the theory because there's no money in non-conspiracy theories or refuting conspiracy theories. So one thing they all said was that that building, I should also add that Ash was particularly concerned about World Trade Center Building 7, which was not hit by an aircraft and which had a lesser fire, but which also came down in exactly the same way as an implosion, a controlled explosion. So building number 7 was another reason for this theory. Anyway, all the experts said that this building was designed such that if the top half of the building did collapse, the force that generated would be absorbed by the bottom half, and the bottom half of that building would not collapse if the top half collapsed down onto the bottom half. So that was the other reason that only an explosion could possibly have done that. The fire came down, a third of the way or half of the way down, and just below the fire, before it collapsed, there were jets of dust and flames just below the fire and halfway up that could easily be interpreted as an explosion. Could also be interpreted as a normal escape of hot air and flames as the air is compressed from a building coming down on top of it. So, the theory Ash had was that Mossad and some black ops had deliberately taken this building down in conjunction with the hijackers to justify the second Iraq war and the Afghanistan campaigns. However, having looked into it, I would have to say that I don't believe that, and here's why. If it had been a controlled explosion, from all the evidence, all the visual evidence, the detonation of the explosives would have to be planted halfway up that building, because that's where the explosion was, and that's where the jets came from, and that's where the building came down halfway up. And that's immediately refuted by the fact that this building was designed to withstand that. So if they had put, say, explosives in the elevator shaft halfway up, and that had shown those dust jets, those flame jets coming out halfway up, that would only have accelerated the collapse of the top half. But by their own admission, the bottom half would have withstood it. So the only sensible extrapolation from that is that there were explosives in the foundations of the building, which is normally where you would put your explosives. If you watch any building being brought down by a controlled explosion, the bottom of the building, the very base, is blown apart and everything above it collapses straight down. Now, there is no evidence at all from anything that's been uncovered or from video evidence of an explosion at the base. There's no sign of that whatsoever. Any possible explosion has to come halfway up, just below the flames. Right? There's nothing at all that says it comes from the bottom. So the theory just fails. It just completely fails, because if that building was truly built to withstand the top half coming down, then the only way you could have brought down an explosion was an explosion at the base, and there was no explosion at the base. Looking across at the building number 7, it's a harder one. It wasn't hit by a jet. It's not clear how the fire started. It didn't have as severe a fire as the two twin towers. But one can just assume it failed. The flames just got it, and it just failed because again there was no sign of an explosion. You can watch the video, and there's no. I mean, if it had been blown up, you would have seen the dust and the shock waves and all the rest of the stuff that you would get from an explosion. Even if we go with the explosion theory halfway up, somehow bringing down the building, which was designed not to be brought down by an explosion halfway up, and where would they have put it? They'd have to put it in the elevator shaft. And they would have to use something like thermite because, as they've also said, steel frame buildings are not brought down easily. So they would have had to use thermite, they'd have had to go on halfway up, and it would have had to have taken down the bottom half that was designed not to come down. So there's just far too many problems with all the conspiracy theories. I also watched an academic on YouTube who had built a model of the building and a model of the forces involved when the top half of a building comes down. Obviously a huge amount of force is generated by its collapse onto the bottom half. And his model predicted that it collapsed in exactly the way that they came down. And I think the problem here is that these buildings were not designed to do what they claimed that they could do, and they were just simply the wrong shape. If you want to make a building that will withstand an attack at the top and will never collapse, you build that building in the shape of a pyramid. If you look at a dry stone wall or any thing built not to collapse when the top's knocked off, it's always built in the shape of a triangle, very wide base, very narrow top. That's why the pyramids are probably built in the shape they're built. So the other thing, of course, is that these espionage forces, the Mossad and the Black Ops, would have had to have been working with the plane hijackers, the crazy jihadi Saudi Arabian Wahhabi, whoever they are. And I just can't imagine that these people would work together. They hate each other, and I just can't see that working. So that's my thoughts on his conspiracy theory. Everybody loves a conspiracy theory. Nobody really loves counter-arguments, so that's my counter-argument.